All right, let's get right into it. And forget what you think you know about batteries. Seriously, this isn't just another happy-go-lucky clean energy story. This is a high-stakes industrial reality unfolding in real time. Right now, the battery industry has become a foundational pillar of the modern economy, and we are smack in the middle of a brutal, transformative phase. Think of it as a technological arms race on a massive scale. Okay, let's dive in. Everything, and I mean everything, starts with this number. In late 2025, the price for an electric vehicle battery pack absolutely crashed to a record low of just $108 per kilowatt hour. Now, this wasn't just some small dip. Nope, this was the biggest price cut we'd seen since 2017, a total shockwave that completely upended the math for traditional utilities and, more importantly, ignited a revolution in grid-scale energy storage.
So here's our game plan for this briefing. We're going to start with that price crash. Then we'll look at the technology adoption S-curve where we really are. We'll decode the crazy chemistry battle happening inside these batteries, analyze China's frankly unbreakable dominance of the supply chain, figure out who the winners and losers are, and then wrap up with the biggest question of all, the future of energy itself.
So, what on earth caused this dramatic price collapse? Well, it's a classic story of supply and demand, just blown up to a massive scale. The real catalyst was a huge oversupply in China's electric vehicle battery market, which kicked off a price war that had this completely unintended but totally revolutionary consequence for grid storage.
And the scale of this imbalance, it's just staggering. I mean, look at this. In 2024, China's lithium-ion battery production capacity surged past 2 terawatt-hours, but the total demand, it was only about 1.25 terawatt-hours. You do the math, that's a 60% surplus, a massive glut of supply. And that forced some incredibly aggressive price competition. You've got way too many batteries, not enough cars to put them in. So what happens? Manufacturers had no choice but to slash prices. And the biggest beneficiaries of all this? The folks buying up batteries for these huge, grid-scale storage projects.
So this price crash, it acted like rocket fuel. It's accelerating batteries up that classic technology adoption curve, pushing them from being kind of a niche product to a technology that is fundamentally re-architecting our entire global energy infrastructure. Now, for anyone who's not familiar, the S-curve is a simple but really powerful idea. Any new tech, it starts out slow, right? That's the incubation stage. Then, as costs fall and the performance gets better, you hit this inflection point and enter a phase of incredibly rapid, almost vertical growth. Finally, the market gets saturated and the curve flattens out. So, the billion-dollar question is, where are batteries on this curve?
Are we still in that slow beginning, or are we strapping in for that wild vertical climb? Well, the data gives us a very, very clear answer. Check this out. A record-breaking 106 gigawatts of new energy storage was added globally in 2025 alone. That is not slow, early adoption. This, right here, is the steep, explosive part of the S-curve. We're now seeing the rollout of what they call 24-hour firmed solar models. That's where cheap storage makes renewables a baseload killer, totally capable of displacing traditional power plants for good.
Now, the economics driving that S-curve are all about the physics and chemistry happening inside the cell itself. And this is not a monolithic technology. Not at all. It's a fierce internal battle between different chemistries, and each one has its own unique profile of cost, performance, and of course risk.
Okay, so on one side, you've got LFP, or lithium iron phosphate. Its advantages are crystal clear. It uses abundant iron, so you can avoid expensive and controversial stuff like cobalt and nickel. This brings the cost down, boosts its cycle life to over 10,000 charges, and it makes it way less likely to catch fire, a huge safety factor. Then on the other side is NMC, nickel manganese cobalt. Now this one packs more energy into a smaller space, giving it higher energy density, which is critical for long-range EVs. It also performs better in the cold, but it comes at a higher cost and with much bigger supply chain and safety risks.
And for stationary grid storage, where the physical size isn't as important as cost per cycle and safety, LFP has been the decisive winner. I mean, no contest. By 2023, it already commanded 80% of the market. Its combination of lower cost, extreme durability, and better thermal stability just made it the logical, bankable choice for these huge, multi-decade infrastructure projects.
But, just as LFP seems to have cemented its rule, a potential challenger has arrived. And this one doesn't even use lithium. Let's talk about sodium ion, probably the most viable threat to the entire lithium ecosystem.
So how does this new contender actually stack up? Well, sodium ion's biggest selling points are its materials. I mean, sodium is one of the most abundant elements on Earth. It's literally everywhere. Plus, it has fantastic performance in extreme cold, which has always been a major Achilles heel for lithium. And look, KTL's latest cells are hitting 175 watt-hours per kilogram, which is really closing the gap with LFP. But, and this is a big but, from an investor's point of view, it's just not quite investment grade yet for mass deployment. The supply chain is brand new, and LFP's sheer scale gives it this powerful incumbency advantage, so you can think of sodium ion as a critical strategic hedge for now, but it is definitely not ready to take the crown.
And all this talk of supply chains brings us from the world of technology to the harsh realities of geopolitics. Because, let's be honest, when you talk about battery supply chains today, you are really talking about one country's strategic dominance, a dominance built over more than a decade of deliberate, focused industrial policy.
First, let's just quickly break down the process here. It's not as simple as just digging something out of the ground. You have to mine the raw minerals, then you have to process and refine them into these super high purity chemicals, then you manufacture specialized components like cathodes and anodes, assemble the final cells and packs, and then finally integrate them into a car or a grid system. It's a long chain.
So while countries like Australia and Chile are major sources of raw lithium, China absolutely dominates every single value-added step that comes after. Through massive state-backed investment and a relentless focus on that midstream, they now control over half the world's raw material processing and nearly all the critical component manufacturing. It's a masterclass in vertical integration that has created an almost insurmountable cost per kilowatt-hour gap with any potential Western competitors.
And here's the result. In 2025, China manufactured well over 80% of all battery cells globally. The US and Europe, they're barely in the game, each with only around 7% of the market. And even their factories are heavily reliant on importing processed materials and components from, you guessed it, China. For now, it is an unbreakable economic and geopolitical moat.
So, given all these technological and geopolitical realities, where is the real value actually being captured? You know, from an investor standpoint, who is winning and who is getting squeezed into a low-margin commodity trap?
The winners are the players who are capturing what's called economic rent, basically, the ones with pricing power and strategic control. This means the companies, who are overwhelmingly in China, that dominate the refining and processing of lithium, nickel, and cobalt. It means the holders of key intellectual property for next-gen cells, and it means the manufacturing giants like CATL and BYD, whose gigascale operations create efficiencies that competitors just can't match.
On the flip side, you have the losers, who are caught in the commodity trap. These are the companies that are just assembling packs from cells they buy from someone else. They have zero pricing power. It also includes manufacturers trying to build these super expensive factories in places like the US or Europe, where costs can be 50% higher than in China. Bottom line, any business model that's completely dependent on that single, concentrated supply chain is in a deeply vulnerable position.
Okay, this all leads us to a final, absolutely massive question. We've covered technology, we've covered economics, geopolitics, but what is the ultimate endgame of this whole battery supercycle? What does this all really mean for the world?
I want you to really think about this. For all of modern history, economic growth has been tied to burning fuel, which is a volatile commodity. But what happens is the cost of storing and dispatching energy from the sun and wind plummets towards zero on a marginal basis. Are we actually witnessing the arrival of the single most powerful deflationary force of our lifetime?
And that is the crucial idea to leave you with. For the very first time, the price of energy is fundamentally decoupling from the price of fuel. We are shifting from a system based on extraction to a system based on manufacturing. That is the true revolution, and the battery is its engine.